You are seeing a house in the US priced at only $5,000, $20,000, or $70,000. Not a burned house, not a collapsed house. It's not an internet scam either. These are real houses, with real addresses, and they are still being sold right now. Sounds like a dream, but if everything is so cheap, why are thousands of houses still sitting on the market? What makes Americans willing to leave an entire town behind instead of buying a house that costs less than the car they're driving? The truth is that the price does not reflect the value of the house. It reflects the value of an entire community that is gradually disappearing. Behind each unbelievable price tag is a story of closed factories, disappearing jobs, rising crime, decaying schools, hospitals miles away, and streets where time seems to have stopped decades ago. In today's video, we will visit the 15 towns with the cheapest house prices in America to find the answer to a single question: what truly makes a house so frighteningly cheap? And you will discover that sometimes the most expensive thing is not the cost of buying the house, but the price you have to pay to live there. Are you ready? Let's go! Let's start with a number that many people find hard to believe. In some areas of Detroit, you can still find houses for sale for under $20,000, cheaper than many old cars on the road. Meanwhile, the vacancy rate in some areas still exceeds 20%, and the rate of violent crime was once many times higher than the national average. If we only look at these numbers, many people would conclude that Detroit is finished. But that's only half the story. Detroit is not a city in decline. Detroit is a city learning how to move on after losing the very industry that created it. When the factories scaled back production, jobs shifted, and the population continuously declined, leaving behind vast neighborhoods with more houses than people wanting to live in them. House prices plummeted, not only because real estate lost value, but also because an entire economic ecosystem that once operated smoothly was disrupted. The interesting thing is that Detroit is not standing still. In recent years, major car manufacturers have continued to reinvest, technology companies and startups have begun to appear in the downtown area, and many old warehouses have been transformed into offices, cafes, or creative spaces. But that revival is happening very unevenly. Only a few streets can create the feeling of a city waking up, while other areas still bear the appearance of a period that hasn't truly ended. Like a giant machine being restarted, but not all the gears are turning at the same speed. In your opinion, if you had the opportunity to own a house for less than $10,000, would you be willing to make the trade-off to become a part of that revival? Please share your opinion below. And now let's move on to the next town, where a more difficult question is being posed. What happens when not only the economy collapses, but the people's trust also disappears? There is a very strange paradox in Flint. You can replace the entire piping system, but you can hardly replace the memory of a nation. That's why, to this day, the price of a median home in Flint is still around $45,000, with living costs about 23% lower than the US. Average and rent in many areas only around $800 per month. Sounds like a bargain, but the real estate market doesn't just price in bricks, wood, and concrete. It is also valued by trust. And trust is the thing that takes the longest to restore. When the manufacturing industry shrank, the population plummeted, and subsequently, the clean water crisis brought the name Flint into the headlines. It is noteworthy that over the years, the water supply infrastructure has been continuously upgraded, the monitoring system has been tightened, and many investment programs have been implemented. But the media often remember a crisis much faster than a city can heal itself. That is the real shock. The crisis may end, but the image of the crisis continues to persist. Therefore, many homebuyers still hesitate despite the very attractive prices. They not only consider the house, but also the peace of mind when telling their friends that they are living in Flint. Ironically, in some places, house prices are high because people believe in the future, while in Flint, house prices are low because people still haven't forgotten the past. Some have likened it to this. Pipes can be replaced, but the market's mindset has no reset button. In your opinion, if you know a city has changed and is still changing, would you be willing to give it a second chance? Or will the first impression always be the deciding factor? If you're also curious about the lesser-known paradoxes of America, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. because the next town will take us to a completely different place, a city right by the border, where housing prices remain extremely low despite the abundance of jobs. So what is really holding back real estate prices there? What if I told you that there is a city in Texas where housing prices are unbelievably low, the unemployment rate is only about 4%, there is an international airport, a developed healthcare system, vibrant trade activities with Mexico, yet real estate prices have not skyrocketed? It sounds contradictory, but that's McAllen. With a recorded median home price of only about $4,000, a cost of living nearly 20% lower than the national average, and rent around $850 per month, McAllen seems to defy all market rules. So what is really keeping home prices here low? The answer does not lie in the decline of the economy, but in the city's location on the map. McAllen is located right next to the U.S.-Mexico border, where almost every debate about immigration, trade, and border security is at least somewhat mentioned. Just the two words border are enough to make many people form a fixed image in their minds, regardless of the fact that daily life here is far from what appears in the news headlines. Meanwhile, local residents still go to work, children still go to school, trucks still line up to transport goods, and hospitals remain one of the largest employers in the area. That's the most interesting thing about McAllen. Sometimes, market perception is more powerful than reality itself. McAllen is like a city caught between two stories. One story told by fairly positive economic numbers, and another story created from the ongoing debates about border policy. In your opinion, if we set aside all biases and only look at the quality of life and cost of living, is McAllen worth considering more than many other expensive cities? Please leave a comment below this video. And right after McAllen, we will arrive at a city that creates an even greater paradox. Housing prices are still very low, but just a few blocks away, you will feel like you are living in two completely different worlds. Let's go. Imagine you are driving through a tree-lined street in Kansas City. On both sides are carefully maintained old brick houses, bustling cafes, jazz music playing from a street corner, and an atmosphere that embodies the true Midwestern spirit of America. But just a few minutes' drive, the scene can change completely. Rows of abandoned houses appear more frequently. Old signs fade over time. And the price of a house in some areas is only around $43,000. That is the biggest paradox of Kansas City. It's not that the whole city is cheap, but the disparity between neighborhoods is what astonishes people. The cost of living here is about 21% lower than the national average, with many areas having rental prices below $800 per month. It sounds like a rare opportunity, but behind those numbers are decades of uneven development. While the downtown area attracts new businesses, art spaces, and redevelopment projects, some other residential neighborhoods are still struggling with the consequences of a prolonged, uneven investment process. That creates a city with two parallel rhythms. One side moving forward, the other still trying to catch up with the past. In other words, in Kansas City, sometimes the value of a house is not determined by the city you live in, but by the street you turn onto. In your opinion, if you had the opportunity to buy a house with a mortgage lower than the rent of an apartment in many big cities, would you dare to take the risk and wait for a neighborhood to change? And now, the next town will take us to the Mississippi Delta, where music still plays every night, but the economy seems to be stuck in an old song that hasn't found its ending. Someone once said about Greenville, "If you just stop by for a weekend, you'll want to move here. But if you stay for a few months, you'll understand why many young people have left." That might be the shortest way to describe the paradox of this town located in the Mississippi Delta. Greenville possesses all the elements that make people love classic America. Peaceful streets, wide porches catching the evening breeze, the sound of blues music emanating from small bars, and a slow-paced atmosphere rarely seen in today's era. The average home price is only about $81,800, rent is around $670 per month, and the cost of living is nearly 30% lower than the national average. Sounds like an ideal place to retire or seek a peaceful life. But the story doesn't end there. What many people don't realize is that culture doesn't always create jobs. Greenville is rich in history, music, and identity. But the local economy still primarily relies on agriculture, with a small portion in the service sector and gambling activities. High-quality career opportunities are scarce, while the violent crime rate is notably high, exceeding 1,200 incidents per 100,000 people. It is that very paradox that makes Greenville resemble a beautiful painting hanging in a room in need of repair. You can love its beauty, but that doesn't automatically solve the challenges of daily life. Perhaps that's why Greenville gives off such a special feeling. During the day, this place makes you want to sit for hours on the porch with a glass of iced tea, listening to the cicadas buzzing and the smell of grilled meat wafting in the breeze. But then summer comes, and swarms of mosquitoes appear, so many that the locals joke they are more organized than delivery services. In your opinion, if given the choice between a place full of character but with few opportunities for development and a modern city but soulless, which one would you choose? And right after Greenville, we will step into another level of cheapness, a place where land prices are almost free, but the official population is zero. It is no longer a town struggling to revive, but a place that has almost disappeared from the map. If someone told you that in America there still exists a piece of land that can be sold for under $1,000 per acre, you might think you've just found the deal of a lifetime. But then you look closer and discover a very strange detail. The official population of the town is zero. Welcome to Pere Cheney, Michigan. A town that was once bustling with the timber industry in the late 19th century, but now only has old foundations, cemeteries, and roads leading deep into the forest. This is when the story no longer revolves around the economy, but shifts to another question. Is a piece of land still valuable if there is almost no life around it? Over time, as the industry disappeared and residents gradually left, Pere Cheney also slowly vanished from the residential map. The unbelievably low land prices are not due to any mystery in this place, but rather because there is almost no infrastructure, no jobs, and no amenities that modern life requires. Some people still joke that in Pere Cheney, you will never have to complain about your neighbors playing music too loudly. It sounds nice, but absolute silence can sometimes make people feel quite uncomfortable. When night falls, and only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees remains, you begin to understand that isolation has its own price. Interestingly, it is the very folk tales and local legends that have made Pere Cheney more famous than when it was still populated. Sometimes, forgotten history becomes the very thing that attracts curious tourists. The next stop is even stranger. A town where the abandoned tunnel is the most famous resident, and the stories surrounding it have made this place one of the most mysterious locations in the United States. There is a saying among those who love exploring abandoned towns: it's easy to get to Moonville, but don't be surprised if when you leave, you carry more questions than answers. It sounds like the opening of a movie, but Moonville was indeed a town that once existed in the hills of Ohio before the coal mining industry declined and the residents gradually left. Today, the official population is zero, and the surrounding area still has plots of land for sale at around $1,500 per acre, but there is almost no infrastructure left to support a normal life. No schools, no convenience stores, no familiar coffee shops, and definitely no Starbucks on the corner. What makes Moonville famous is not the real estate, but the old railroad tunnel and the folk tales that have existed for decades. Every year, there are still many tourists, photographers, and history enthusiasts who come to explore the pristine scenery and the unique atmosphere of this place. But that is also the paradox worth pondering, a place that can be very attractive to visit on weekends, but not a place where most people want to start a new life. The low land prices are not due to a lack of beauty, but rather a lack of the fundamentals that help a community thrive in the long term. Someone humorously said, "Zillow says there's no data, while Moonville seems to be whispering, 'Just go in and see for yourself.'" It sounds amusing, but it reflects an interesting truth. Sometimes the value of a piece of land does not lie in its scenery, but in its ability to connect with the rest of the world. In your opinion, if you had the opportunity to own a piece of land in absolute quiet nature, but had to trade it for almost complete isolation, would you be willing? And now we will go even further. A place so remote that even delivery services almost have to surrender to the distance and wild nature. Imagine you are standing in front of a wooden house in the wilderness of Alaska. In front of you is a thick mist covering the pine forest. Behind is the sound of waves from a small bay, and around, completely no neighbors. No car sounds, no street lights, no convenience stores, only nature and a silence so profound that it makes people feel uneasy. Welcome to Portlock, a ghost town since the 1950s, where the current population is 0 and some plots of land can still be valued around 0.000 per acre, depending on accessibility. Sounds like a paradise for those who want to escape the world, but sometimes that low price carries a very clear message. The market is saying that this place is too isolated for most people to want to start a life. What makes Portlock famous is not only its remote location, but also the local legends about mysterious creatures that have been passed down through generations by the indigenous people. Although there is no concrete evidence for those stories, they still contribute to the mysterious atmosphere that has led to Portlock appearing in numerous exploration shows and documentaries. But if we set aside all the legends, the reality is still enough to make many people hesitate. No complete service system, no stores, no nearby hospitals, limited communication signals, and the geographical distance make every basic need a challenge. That is the real reason why real estate here has almost no mass appeal. Someone once joked, "In Portlock, the biggest problem isn't living with nature, but when you need help, nature doesn't know who to call either." A humorous saying, but it accurately reflects the essence of isolation. In your opinion, is a piece of land extremely cheap, still attractive if it comes with the feeling of having to face every situation alone? At the next stop, we will arrive at a small town where history is not only told through abandoned houses, but also through a murder case that makes this place more memorable than its land price. If you ever thought that buying a house meant buying a new future, then Govan might make you think again. This is a small town in Washington state where the population is now only about 3 people. Some lots were once sold for under $5,000, and at one point, people jokingly said, "You could almost buy the whole town." Sounds like an unbelievable bargain, until you start reading the history of this place. Govan was once an important stop on the railroad line, but as traffic changed and residents moved away, the houses were gradually left behind. What keeps the name Govan mentioned today is not its economy, but a famous case from the early 20th century, which has become a part of local memory for over 100 years. But don't let those stories distract you. What really keeps land prices in Govan so low is not its history, but its current isolation. There aren't many services, there isn't a large enough community to maintain the rhythm of life, and all basic amenities are very far away. When the population drops too low, a town almost only exists on the map. And if you think Govan is the extreme of cheap real estate, just wait for the next destination. There, land is almost given away for free, but its true value lies in stories that money cannot quantify. Beulah was once expected by the first immigrants to become an ideal community, but time had other plans. Nowadays, the town has almost disappeared, leaving only the old cemetery, crumbling foundations, and plots of land that were once traded for under $500. If you only look at the numbers, this could be one of the places with the cheapest land in the United States. But then you will realize an interesting thing. A very low purchase price does not equate to high utility value. No shopping malls, no schools, no large community to create a meaningful life. What remains most in Beulah are the stories passed down from generation to generation. It is precisely the legends of strange lights appearing around the cemetery and the local folklore that have attracted many history and exploration enthusiasts to Beulah. Of course, that is part of folklore and not evidence of anything supernatural. But some humorously say, in Beulah, you don't have to pay a homeowners association fee, but at night, your imagination will charge you. That saying makes many people laugh, but it also reminds us that real estate is not just about the purchase price, but also about the living environment, opportunities, and a sense of belonging. At this point, you might think that the cheapest places in America are all forgotten towns. But the truth is even more surprising. Right after this, we will return to towns that still have residents, schools, hospitals, and communities. But house prices are still so low that many people can't believe it. And it is those very places that truly reveal what is changing in modern America. There is a saying that fits Clarksdale perfectly. If music could pay the mortgage, this place would surely be one of the richest neighborhoods in America. This is the cradle of the blues genre, where every street corner carries a piece of American cultural history. However, the paradox lies in the fact that the price of a house here is only about $60,000, $65,000, with some even below $50,000. Meanwhile, the average income of a household is only about $30,000 per year, and the population has decreased by nearly 20% since 2000. Those numbers reveal a reality. Rich in identity does not mean rich in opportunity. Tourists still come to Clarksdale to listen to blues, visit small bars, and take photos with famous music icons, but then they get back in their cars and leave before dark. Money from tourism visits, but doesn't stay. A city cannot live on memories alone, no matter how beautiful those memories may be. Some people have bitterly compared. Tourists come, listen to a blues song, buy a few souvenirs, and then leave. And the electricity bills, water bills, and mortgage payments remain with the locals. That is the reason why house prices are low, not because this place lacks soul, but because the economy has not created enough incentives to retain young people. And if you think Clarksdale is the clearest example of a town living in the past, then the next town tells a completely different story. It didn't collapse in a day. It just slowly ran out of energy, like a deflating balloon over many decades. When mentioning the state of New York, most people will immediately think of the million-dollar apartments in Manhattan. Therefore, when hearing about a house costing only around $65,000, $75,000 right in New York, the first reaction is usually, there must be a problem. And indeed, there is. It's not about the leaking roofs or crumbling walls, but the story behind an entire city. Jamestown has a cost of living about 20% lower than the U.S. average, with rent only around $750 to $850 per month, but the population has decreased by more than 25% since 1970. It is worth noting that Jamestown did not experience a major shock that caused everything to collapse in an instant. It declined very slowly, almost silently. This is the kind of town that makes it hard for you to find a specific reason to criticize. Not too chaotic, not too dangerous, still with hospitals, schools, and peaceful neighborhoods. But it is precisely for this reason that many people call Jamestown the city that forgot to breathe. After the factories reduced their operations, jobs gradually shifted, young people left one by one, and new investments were not strong enough to create another growth cycle. The city still exists, but it lacks a strong enough pull to bring people back. Perhaps this is one of the most thought-provoking lessons of the American real estate market. House prices not only reflect the present, but also expectations for the future. In your opinion, is a peaceful place with almost no motivation for development worth calling a bargain? And if Jamestown makes you feel like everything is just slowing down, then in the next position, we will arrive at a town where just turning the wrong corner can completely change your perception of the city. If someone told you that you could buy a 3-bedroom house for just around $55,000 to $65,000, your first reaction would probably be, what's the catch? And that is the question that Pine Bluff forces everyone to ask. The cost of living here is about 25% lower than the national average in the U.S., with rent only around $700, $800 per month, but the population has decreased by nearly 40% since 1970. What makes Pine Bluff special is not because the entire city is struggling, but because just a few blocks away, you step into a completely different picture. There are neighborhoods that are still well-maintained, children still ride their bikes in the yard, and neighbors still greet each other every morning. But there are also areas that have been affected by years of declining investment and job opportunities. That's why many locals often say, in Pine Bluff, buying a house not only requires looking at the house, but also at the street. A saying that is both humorous and reflects the reality that a low price cannot replace understanding the community you are about to live in. You can save hundreds of thousands of dollars when buying a house, but if you choose the wrong area, that savings can sometimes turn into a prolonged feeling of unease. And if Pine Bluff shows that a distance of just a few streets can create two different worlds, then the town in the second position will prove another thing. There are places where low house prices are not because the present is too bad, but because the glorious past has long since faded. At one time, East Liverpool was dubbed the ceramics capital of the world, where thousands of workers toiled day and night and the kilns lit up the Ohio sky. Today, you can still buy a house here for about $50,000, $60,000, with rent only around $650, $750 per month, while the cost of living is nearly 30% lower than the national average. But the most notable thing is that the city's population has decreased by more than half since the 1950s. Not because of a sudden disaster, but because the economy gradually changed, and the industry that once sustained the entire city has slowly faded into the past. Interestingly, East Liverpool is neither chaotic nor particularly dangerous. The streets remain peaceful, many houses are still preserved, and life goes on slowly. The biggest issue is the driving force for development. When a city no longer creates enough new jobs to attract the younger generation, real estate prices also struggle to break through. And the number one spot will take us to a very different place. A town that is neither shattered, nor abandoned, nor overly dangerous, but where house prices remain inexplicably low. If the previous town saw house prices drop due to crises, isolation, or recession, Connellsville tells a much more nuanced story. House prices here are still around $50,000, $60,000, with rents ranging from $700, $850 per month, and the cost of living is nearly 30% lower than the national average in the U.S. The population has decreased by nearly 60% compared to its peak, but notably, the safety level is generally better than many other cities in the old industrial belt. In other words, Connellsville is not cheap because it is collapsing. It's cheap because the market no longer expects this place to grow as strongly as before. This is the kind of town that makes you feel everything is still running smoothly. The people still know each other, local shops are still open, schools are still operating, and life goes on peacefully. But that calmness also reflects another reality. The city has found a new state of equilibrium. Instead of continuing to chase the growth dreams of the past, perhaps the most fitting saying for Connellsville is, it doesn't try to become something else, it just continues to be itself. And that is precisely what makes house prices here no longer reflect the crisis, but rather a market that has accepted reality. After passing through 15 towns with 15 very different stories, perhaps we all realize one thing. House prices not only reflect the value of a house, but also the health of an entire community. Some places were once the heart of American industry. Some are famous for their culture, and some seem almost forgotten by time. The common thread is that each low price tells a story about jobs, population, opportunity, and the changes that America has undergone over the decades. What about you? If given the choice, would you be willing to buy a house for $50,000 in exchange for a peaceful life with fewer opportunities? Or would you still choose to stay in the expensive cities for a brighter future? Please share your opinion in the comments section. I would really like to know which town surprised you the most and whether you would be willing to live there or not. If you love lesser-known perspectives on America, from economic and social issues to the stories behind the numbers, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. Each week, we will explore more interesting facts that rarely appear in daily news broadcasts. This video is produced for the purpose of providing information, analysis, and commentary based on publicly available data at the time of production. Real estate prices, economic conditions, and local situations may change over time. The content is not intended to recommend investment, buying, or selling real estate, nor does it provide a comprehensive reflection of any city or community. If you are considering a financial decision or relocating, please refer to additional official and updated sources of information before making a decision. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next videos.